Okay, all right. We are live streaming right now. Again, this is the Senate Transportation Committee. And we are discussing our next subject this morning is transportation research in Vermont. We have a couple folks with us this morning, and Dr. Emily Parkney from Research Program Manager, Agency of Transportation. Tell us something about this, who you are, and something about this subject. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And so Jeannie, I don't have screen sharing yet. So
okay, I'll be with you in this minute.
Okay, so I'm Emily Parkini. I'm the research manager with Vermont Agency of Transportation. I've been in Vermont exactly 5 years and got the opportunity to present to you for at least a few of those years. And I don't know if I can share screen now. So just a second. Now you get to see, sorry that you're seeing my email there, but out of here. Sorry, I'm not because of the screen share, I'm not getting to my how to present here. Slideshow. Are we getting? All right, hopefully you guys see my screen now. I apologize for my
all right.
difficulties there. So I'm the at the agency research manager, and I want to just speak for a couple minutes here. So hopefully you can see it's covered up by some of the Zoom stuff, but hopefully you guys can see the screen.
I can see the $100 bills, the $50 bills, $20
Oh,
bills.
That perfect. So
like
my videos are on that. But so that's my point here, is that I'm trying to maximize the federal research work program that we have. And I'm trying to spend the money engaging in research that VTrans can use, engaging staff across the agency, sharing our research and innovations across the agency. And so part of this is we have expenditures that are committed that have to be spent from our research program. And a lot of those are national commitments. So I'm going to go over that in a minute. But then, there's a lot of projects that we are supporting that are funded by other sources. And then for the limited available funding that we can spend on external research project, there's an open competition. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today, and a few examples. So the first point here, research that benefits Vermont, and it's not just the research group or the group that wanted the research, but a lot of these projects have people from across the agency, other agencies. We had a meeting on Monday with state police. Were there as part of the technical advisory committee guiding the project. And then sort of the transition that I've been going through over the 5 years is not just that we need to implement the research, but really starting to ask the questions at the beginning of the project. How are we going to use this? What can we do to make this usable now, or kind of thing. And so with that, quantitative and qualitative research benefits evaluation is something I'm starting to get into. So engaging staff across the agency is everything from a champion for every project that's not a research person, somebody technical within the agency that wants the project. The middle column here are all the different bureaus that are involved in our recent projects. So I'm kind of excited that this is across the agency. It's not just my interests and knowledge, it's it's everybody's. So or whatever helps Vermont and whatever helps AOT. And then a lot of this is giving the research advice, research results and engaging people internally, externally. We have an annual symposium, we have a quarterly newsletter. We also participate in a lot of national, regional meetings and projects and different forums. So this is just, I mentioned, that part of, or I think almost 40% of the research budget goes towards these, committed funds. And some of these are sort of just fees that all states pay into the National Cooperative Highway Research Program. All states pay into the Transportation Research Board. And then we have selected to put some of our money into the 6-state and New England Transportation Consortium and other pooled funds. Sort of we combine efforts, then our money goes further. And then there's the state highway and transportation officials, which these are all state DOTs, have some technical service programs that we contribute to every year. And so, slide 2 of this are, activities that, the research work program doesn't fund. One of these is the University Transportation Center. This is a USDOT funded center at the University of Maine, where UVM is one of the 5 universities funded by that center. And so we put a bunch of time into helping to guide projects that center is doing. Another example is an NSF award at UVM, where they received, I think it's $4 million on wireless sensors for infrastructure. And then we also, research staff, but also other technical staff at AOT, participate in. MassDOT has a couple of conferences. There was a National Assault Symposium that we could participate in virtually this summer. There, in a couple of weeks, the Institute of Transportation Engineers is going to have a spring technical conference. And then here in Vermont, there's the Association of Consulting Engineers has a technical conference. That's in a couple of weeks. So after all that effort, there is a little bit left in the research work program for external research projects. And that's where we have an open competition. And my next slide here is, so these are like the last 2 years of projects. So I wanted to share, just sort of the topics, and that they, they're being led by champions from all across the agency. But of these projects, I think 5 of them, University of Vermont is involved with. One of them, the third one, Rapid Setting Concrete, University of New Hampshire has the testing equipment that our structures people wanted and our materials concrete people wanted to investigate whether the rapid setting, so the quick drying concrete that they're using in our accelerated bridge projects, and whether that's the same performance as traditional concrete. And, like if we're going to get the same years of expected life. So that's what we're looking into for that project. And some of these others, like that's the first line, this sort of traffic safety countermeasures, for the towns. That's where state police are involved. We have people across the agency, both planning and some policy and planning, and then also, our TISMO folks, our traffic safety management folks, trying to figure out how to help towns understand, with speed limit reductions, what we can do to make things safer and to help educate that people are there. So I see that Senator Chittenden has raised his hand.
Yes, go right ahead, Senator Chittenden, go ahead.
Great, thank you. This is a very relevant presentation on the rapid setting concrete, the money that's going to UNH. You said it's because they have equipment that I'm guessing or inferring that UVM does not have. In these discussions, was it at all an option, or do you think we should be looking at investing in that type of equipment here in Vermont for future testing of concrete so that UVM can provide the services in this area so that we can keep it in state?
That's a good question. And I think it's a really difficult question because this is not a lot of money. This is, $150,000 over 2 years. And I, all of these projects are, sort of $300,000 a year. So, I don't think it's worth UVM trying to chase a project that we don't know is going to happen and get like equipment. Of our current projects, another one is like asphalt testing, that UVM does not have the asphalt testing stuff or things. And so right now we're talking about, and that's only $50,000. And so UConn is trying to convince us that they can do what we're looking for that project, this, in our next cycle of projects. So I think, maybe Dr. Rowengold can talk to us about whether chasing projects with equipment is going to be feasible, because I think it's difficult. We don't know what 2 and 3 years from now are going to be our big needs. And part of our guidance from Federal Highway, and also our state contracted administration folks, is to make federal dollars as competitive as possible. And so we have a list of people that can apply for these projects. So they've qualified to be on our list, and that then they know about our projects. So I think that's the best way to get to use our limited resources. And it turns out that UVM is very competitive. What they propose is attractive to us. So
quick follow-up, Chair.
Yep, go ahead.
That makes sense, but I worry that we're looking too short term on this. I say that the cheap comes out expensive in the long run, and I wonder if it might be more important that we make sure that UVM is a continual partner with I work at UVM, very biased, I bleed green and gold, and I'm just wondering if maybe we should in fact be looking to ways to make sure UVM has the equipment and all the facilities and expertise to support the Vermont Agency of Transportation, rather than relying on maybe UConn or UNH will have the capacity to support us future in the years to come. It seems to make sense to at least recognize the value and benefit of that local state-run relationship and state relationship with our flagship institution.
Yeah, I think it's sort of over my head. I mean, it's just a small amount of money, and I don't know how it makes sense for UVM to compete in everything to be able to.
Well, maybe UVM can answer those questions when we get to that. Sure. Okay. Go
All
ahead.
right. Thank you. So, yeah, so just a couple of other things I wanted to share going on is that, Federal Highway requires that we have a research peer exchange with our, peers every 4 to 6 years. It's been 6 years in Vermont. So we are planning a virtual exchange with the 7 states listed on the table here, or the slide. And now it used to be that the states came in and like rated us, or, sort of grilled us on what we were doing. But now we get to pick 3 topics that, the other states are interested, we're interested in, and, just trying to, give you a feel of, interactions with materials and pavement staff. I think, whether there's equipment in state to do the kinds of things that your materials and pavement staff, that's a good part of that conversation, I think. And then, as I mentioned before, qualitative, quantitative evaluation. What are some of these other states doing? What should we be doing? What can we all do? Sort of next steps. And then, engagement of leadership with research. And I think actually, our engaging with the senators is one part of that, but also just, the leadership within AOT. And so, so I'm excited that this is happening. I'm excited that these other states are excited to share what they're doing on these topics, and then how we can all talk about what will help us. This, I think you've seen things like this before, that we have an annual symposium, we do a quarterly newsletter. The annual symposium, since 2017, we have posters and fact sheets. Those are available on the website now. So all the previous information. This year, we are hoping to do something hybrid, so that, I need to start working on that. But I think this has been a good way to share what we're doing, and that's part of the goal, is to share what we're doing and get more and more people involved. Excuse me. And so this is just a few additional activities. I don't need to go over every one of the cells here, but just to give you an idea of the external committees we do through the state DOTs, through Transportation Research Board, training, webinars, and meetings. And then, we share some of those materials with staff and share the opportunities with staff. There's been some UAS, the unmanned aerial systems training in New England that we were able to help get some funding so that the 6 New England states could, I think it's 4 of the states could join. And we did in-person training this past summer, actually, at UVM. And then just another activity just last week, we had the bridge construction symposium and the pavement construction symposium through the New England Transportation Consortium. And so people joined from all 6 states. It was virtual. We had presentation and then broke into breakout groups, and people were really able to learn from their peers about different pavement treatments and what some of these new concretes and cracking and what's going on with the bridges, and get some feel for not just what's happening in Vermont, but from our New England peers. So so I can end there, but please ask questions of for these slides, these activities, or any other kinds of activities. But I'm happy for the opportunity to come and talk to you guys.
Maybe it's a good time to link our conversation about recycled glass with any research that's going on.
So yeah, thank you. And so that's at the bottom here. And I actually looked ahead at Greg's presentation. He actually has a slide. So more, the pictures are great. But so with UVM through the University Transportation Center led by U of Maine, there's a project on looking at the processed glass that CSWD generates, and whether when it's made into a sand borrow, so the smaller than 3/8 minus, that we can use as sand in our projects, whether the performance of that is going to be the same as conventional sand. And then there's a grad student right now looking at the deleterious materials, or like waste products, and whether they, here I can stop sharing so that we can see. Here we go, stop share. See each other. So that's a great example of a project that we're trying to look into the how to use the processed glass and whether it's going to be as good kind of thing. Their research is also helps administer the recycled materials working group that the agency runs. So we actually had our every 2-month meeting yesterday. And so that's kind of an update on, processed glass and recycled shingles, and the foam glass asphalt that's coming out of, the foam glass aggregate that's coming out of Essex right now. And we're actually setting up, tours of the Essex plant. And there's a lot of interest. And CSWD was at the meeting yesterday and talking about, can they contribute to the recycled glass that comes out of Essex and that kind of stuff. So definitely we're interested. We're trying to push another, just last week, there's a TRB national study on recycling plastic waste in infrastructure, which is mostly asphalt pavement. And so, that's something that Vermont has decided we don't want to be at the forefront of doing, but we definitely want to pay attention to, these other states and their examples of success with using recycled asphalts and asphalt, and some of the, recycled, rubber and asphalt and this kind of thing. So, I mean, Vermont is definitely trying to stay on top of all that and learn from others. Massachusetts has a lot of experience with using asphalt rubber gap braided. And we've definitely had a couple of conversations about that in the past week of, is this good for performance? Is it good for the environment? How much rubber does it use, kind of thing. So those conversations are all there.
One more question, Chair Mazza?
Yes, go right ahead.
Maybe a question / comment, but I'm curious, Emily, I'd love to hear about the glass, because we're really creating a local market, so we're not shipping that stuff all the way down to Massachusetts and all over. Wearing down our roads is great. The other thing that I've heard in this conversation area about research at VTrans is that other states have had dual appointments, or individuals that might work at the university but also draw some of their salary from the Agency of Transportation for the state. And that really, we do that at UVM. So we have dual appointments across 2 colleges, and it allows for 2 feet or fit in both camps, so to speak, and it does a lot to synchronize, create some efficiency, so that you have that point person, that concentrated person that knows what VTrans is thinking about long term, because they're attending the staff meetings, and they also know what the schools are thinking about, and they can usually merge and align those things on the longer term horizon. Is that something that's come up in your travels so far at VTrans?
So at VTrans, not specifically. I am familiar with, Louisiana does a lot of that. Iowa does a lot of that. Even Virginia, which I'm most familiar with because I moved up from Virginia, the DOT has a building on the UVA campus kind of concept. They actually, everybody in that building is a DOT employee. They're not, it's not the dual like you're describing, but Vermont is very different because we're much smaller than those three examples. And, there is some tradition. And again, so those are the three states I know about. And I guess maybe Kentucky would be a fourth state, out of the 50, so it's not everywhere. And yeah, I think as a small state, Vermont is actually really lucky that there's me and a research engineer that we are able to do these things like, the research dissemination, like, try to take advantage of the projects at the University of Maine and trying to help guide those then to be good for Vermont, that other small states, don't have full-time staff to do some of these activities. So yeah, the dual appointment thing is interesting, and I will write it down and pass it on up that it came up, but I don't see it like working right away in Vermont kind of thing, or happening right away.
Thanks.
Okay, any other questions? Well, thank you very much for all the input, and anything else at this point, or we'll move on to Dr. Gregory Rangel. Is that it, Rangel?
Rowan Gold.
Thank you,
okay.
everybody.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you. All right, you've heard the conversation this morning, and you've also heard some questions from Senator Chittenden, so probably you can address them all. Go right ahead.
All right, I have a few slides too, that actually address some of these things. And last year I gave you a long presentation. This year I kept it short so we could have more conversation. So just let me see if I can share my screen here. Yeah, there we go. Doing this thing right. Okay, so
little something about you. Just tell us a little something about yourself and how you fit in this picture. Okay, thank you.
Yep. So thanks for inviting me to speak with you all today. So I'm Dr. Gregory Rowan. I'm the director of the Transportation Research Center at UVM, and I'm also an associate professor in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering. I'm a more recent addition to Vermont than Emily. I moved here about 3 years ago to take this job at UVM.
You like it? You like it here?
I love it here.
Okay, good.
I had been waiting around for an opportunity to move to Northern New England ever since I left Northern New England to go to college in California. And I worked at the University of New Mexico for 6 years.
Wow.
And job opened up here. I jumped on it, and I'm so happy to be back here. I grew up in New Hampshire. So.
Okay, we got you over here. That's good.
Yeah, and my motivation as well, I'll talk about a little bit today. I wanted to come here because I love this area of the country, but also because I'm very interested in understanding how transportation, particularly how transportation works in smaller and rural communities, and how do we make it more sustainable, both financially, for the environment, things like that. It's a huge challenge. Most of my training, most of the knowledge in the transportation sort of realm is from urban areas, focused on congestion and things like that. So it's a very exciting opportunity to be here and to work on these things. So that's just a little bit about me. So the UVM Transportation Research Center, most of you are probably familiar with it. Shared this in the past, but for anyone watching online or anything like that, we were established in 2006 with a big grant from the U.S. Department of Transportation. The center is located administratively in the university in the College of Engineering and Mathematical Sciences, although we have faculty and students who are outside of the College of Engineering participating. We have about 12 core faculty and staff. that participate routinely really focus more on transportation, but we have additional, right, we're part of a big university, so people participate on particular projects based on interests and expertise. We provide research opportunities to a number of undergraduates, masters, and PhD students. We're not like an academic unit in the sense we don't offer degrees or anything, where it's just a research center. But we have lots of students from campus working with the faculty and staff affiliated with the center on projects. And we're also home to other related programs and centers on campus. So one of those is National Center for Sustainable Transportation. It's a consortium of universities led by UC Davis. We're one of their partners. There's a Transportation Infrastructure Durability Center. Emily mentioned that. That's the one with UMaine. It's a consortium of universities. These are both US DOT funded transportation centers. We also operate the Vermont Clean Cities Coalition. This is a US Department of Energy funded program to promote the use of more efficient vehicles and alternative fuels. And the Northeast Transportation Workforce Center, which is a USDOT funded center focused on developing, transitioning the transportation workforce to with new skills and things of that nature. So we do a lot of things, and we've really, my goal in moving here to UVM, the pitch I made when I took this position was to really focus what we're doing around sustainability in small and rural communities. And so our current research areas and expertise are in alternative and multimodal transportation, modeling energy use, emissions, environmental impacts of transportation systems and policy decisions, looking at equity and travel behavior and how different strategies and policies and things we might be pursuing affect those. Again, a lot, as Emily highlighted, we do a lot with obviously the infrastructure, how things are built, maintained, the safety of using our roads and other transportation systems. And of course, we can't talk about transportation without thinking about communities and land use, right? With transportation's necessary because things are spread out in space. And so thinking about both how to rearrange things in space and how to bridge that space with infrastructure, those are the two things we think about when trying to solve transportation problems. Can I give you a quick overview of a few current projects to just give you a sense of the wide range of activities we're engaged in. The first one is that sand project, recycled glass aggregate project that is funded by US DOT through that University of Maine-led consortium. This is thinking about how if we can use the processed glass aggregate in roadway construction, the sand is used in the subbase of roadways to provide drainage and some structure. Glass is essentially sand, or sand is essentially glass. The issue, as Emily pointed out, there's, when we crush up glass in a mixed recycling stream, there's going to be some contamination, the labels, the caps on bottles, things like that. So this project is all about quantifying how much of the materials in the glass aggregate, and to the extent that not all of it's removed, does that have an impact on the performance of the glass aggregate compared to regular sand? So if we can develop sort of a testing procedure that's reliable, so we can quantify that, we could use this with greater confidence, and it prevents, as Senator Chin was saying, we're not shipping this stuff out of state. It means less digging up sand around Vermont for these roadways. So there's a number of benefits if we can figure this out, and it's moving right along. So that's one of our sort of infrastructure related projects. We've got a project that actually relates in some ways to things we were just talking about. We're looking at how the infrastructure itself contributes to heat. Most of you are probably familiar with the urban heat island effect, right? Big cities, urban areas are warmer than surrounding rural areas and suburban areas. More recent research is indicating that the temperature varies actually quite substantially even within an urban area. And so from block to block, we can see large temperature changes in the air. And the built environment, roads and buildings, are the main contributor to these differences in temperature. And so what we've done, we've got these really high sensitivity temperature sensors and GPS units. We've put them on these electric bicycles that we've purchased, and we're driving them around different towns and villages and rural places in Vermont to get a really detailed understanding of how different amounts of how different built forms affect temperature, including we're trying to look at, if you were to move a parking lot a few feet away from an apartment building, how much cooler will that apartment building be? How much less air conditioning is required? To the extent that in rural places in Vermont, people may not have adequate cooling. There's things we can do with the built environment that we can change pretty quickly compared to, reversing global warming or something like that. So we're trying to understand what the opportunity is to modify the built environment, particularly roads, sidewalks, parking lots, what they're made out of, maybe exactly where they're located, to bring down the temperature. And so you can see on the right, this is a ride we did in Burlington last summer, and more than 10 degree difference in temperature from the new north end of Burlington, which is a little more suburban, to the downtown area. We've recorded temperature differences as much as 20 degrees. And we're doing this not just in Burlington, we're doing this all across.
Warmer or cooler?
Well, it's cooler where I live in the new north end, and it's a lot warmer downtown. So that's the red.
That because of the asphalt, a lot of asphalt.
Buildings and asphalt, yeah. There's other things. It's a tricky thing to figure out because we also got a lake, we got winds, there's a few hills and stuff, but this is largely driven by the built environment. And so
Senator Ingalls' area up there, he has snow in July, so up in the Northeast Kingdom.
Well, that's if it goes early.
If it goes early.
So, but this is it's a really cool project. It's funded by NOAA, and we also have funding from US EPA, where we're looking at different materials and how those affect temperature. So like a concrete slab on a sidewalk can retain that and store heat from the day long into the night. And that's when you want to open your windows and cool down your house or your apartment. If we use things that have a lower ability, don't store as much energy, like maybe that foamed glass material, things like that. There are opportunities to both pave things less or differently, make them out of different materials, or just move things around a little bit. Put some trees or grass between a building and its parking lot or driveway. So we're trying to do the science of understanding, if we modify the environment, what's the potential to bring down the temperature, save people money, make you more comfortable, things like that. So it's really an intersection of a number of things here. It's a fun project. And the students love it because students get to spend their summer riding bikes around Vermont. And another project, this gets more into travel behavior and some of our policy analysis. This project's looking at just how we even define rural. We talk about rural and urban. We know, being in Vermont, it's much more complicated than that. We have small towns and villages. We have really rural places. We have a place like Winooski. It's very dense, very urban area in Burlington. And when there's, general knowledge that in a big urban area, people tend to drive less, and in a rural place more. The data I'm showing you here is derived from motor vehicle records in Vermont, vehicle registration records, and those annual inspections that we all get, where they record your odometer reading. We've took that information, estimated how far vehicles are driven on a yearly basis, mapped that to look at how people travel differently in different parts of the state, to get a nice idea of the opportunities to possibly reduce travel, but also really to look at the impacts of different policies. So if we were to charge for how we use the roads differently, how might that impact different people in different places and different types of towns and different geographic areas of the city, of the state. We see some interesting things. People drive less in Burlington on average, but people also drive less in some of our small towns and things as well. And in the really rural places, you can see the bars on these plots show the range of the data, with the line in the middle being the median. There's, obviously a lot of variability too. So it's complex. And so this is research that we've just started up in the last year or so, trying to build from the ground up a better understanding of how people travel in Vermont, and then think about what the opportunities are to make things more efficient, right? Are there opportunities to travel differently? What are the implications of different policies that might affect travel or the cost of travel? We're looking at patterns of vehicle purchases and types of vehicles people use, and thinking about the questions related to EV, electric vehicle adoption, things like that, which is really interesting. This brings me to my main point here. There's a ton of research needs. Emily has highlighted a number of current research projects. But if I were to have to pick one thing that I think is something we've overlooked, a critical research gap, I think it's transportation policy research, and that's a pretty broad term. But I think this is really important in thinking about the decisions ahead and even the decisions we've been making recently, right? We have rapidly changing technology, autonomous vehicles, they're here and they'll, we're focused on electric vehicles right now, but there's all this automation happening. We have the experience of the pandemic. We're all meeting virtually. People are continuing to work remotely, e-retail, e-everything, delivering of, whether it's instead of going out to a restaurant, shopping, right? This is changing how people travel. It's changing where people live. And the changes aren't equitable. Not everyone can work remotely. Not everyone can buy things online and get them delivered quickly. Not everyone can take advantage of some of these transportation networks companies like the Ubers and things like that. So we have those changes, and there's new technology we don't even know about yet that will surely be impacting the decisions we need to make. And then we have climate change, the Global Warming Solution Act targets, the Comprehensive Energy Plan, and how to respond to those policies and meet those targets. And there's no shortage of transportation policy research out there, but there's a huge shortage when it comes to how this all works in a smaller rural context, like in Vermont. It's not like we can just build subways everywhere in Vermont. We are a rural state. People don't move to Vermont to live in a place that looks like Manhattan. And so the trick, what to figure out here is, how does this work? How does it work for Vermonters? And as an example of some of the gaps, these are two recent big comprehensive plans. The Vermont Climate Action Plan, which was finalized in December, and the Vermont Comprehensive Energy Plan, which was completed in January. They identify pathways to achieving our greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. In this case, the pathways include electrifying vehicles, buying cleaner, lower carbon fuels, thinking about ways to reduce vehicle travel or the demand, which includes looking at land use patterns. What's critical to understand is that these are pathways. If we can electrify a certain number of vehicles, we might be able to realize these emission reduction targets or our energy goals. The pathways also have associated with them a number of strategies, such as providing subsidies for buying EVs, building out charging networks along the state's highways, and where people park their cars, things like that. What's missing is how to actually implement those strategies, and even understanding if putting all those strategies together will get us to where we need to go. That's the most challenging part of it. So we've done the modeling, or the consultants the state has hired have done the models to show if we can do these things, we can meet these targets. And we've identified strategies that can work towards following these pathways and achieving the targets. But exactly how to implement those, there's a lot of questions. What size of a subsidy? Who should get the subsidy? How long do we keep the subsidies? We build out a charger network. Where should they go? How many will we need? Will people charge at home? Will they want to charge at work? How do you make a long road trip work? There's lots of questions. And so that's a big research opportunity and challenge. And it's something that, the UVM Transportation Research Center is very much interested in trying to help the state understand. This is just an example of one of those pathways. This is modeling that was done for the Climate Action Plan and Comprehensive Energy Plan. It indicates the number of battery electric vehicles that would be required over time to meet the state's greenhouse gas reduction standards. It's a huge amount of EVs. And so the question is, how do we get there? And the way we think about this in our research is, first, the policies need to be effective. If we put it all together, will we get there? It's always going to be uncertain, but we want to think about, what combination of policies are most likely to allow us to achieve our targets. Once we determine that, we have to think about the efficiency. Is that the least cost way of doing this? Are there more cost-effective ways to increase the adoption rate of electric vehicles? Is electrifying the vehicles also the most cost-effective strategy? Maybe there's opportunities to reduce travel, to use more transit or things like that, or some combination. And even that is not enough. We have to think about the fairness of these policies. Are they equitable? Not just are they equitable across different socioeconomic groups, race, income, but urban, rural, for heavy-duty sector firms and businesses and households, right? Equity is a complex set of questions. And so this is what I see as something that we have not, Emily mentioned VTrans has limited external funding. And we often have focused on addressing some of those shorter term needs, the making sure that infrastructure is durable and safe and resilient, and addressing traffic safety concerns and things of that nature. These policy questions are tough, and they also take a long time to unravel. When the Climate Action, the Global Warming Solution Act and the Climate Action Committee were doing their work, they came to us, their consultants came to us and asked for data and information and models. And while we were able to provide them a lot of data, there's a lot of data we couldn't provide because we don't have it. We haven't done that research. And it's collecting this data and doing the research and building the models and understanding how people will react to these changes takes time. And often it takes too much time once whether it's a senator, a state agency, or someone else asks us for how something might work. We have to collect the data, process the data, conduct the research. It can take years. And so that is the challenge I'm sort of putting out there is, if we want to be able to have more adaptive policy, if we want to understand, have some information capacity to look to design the policies to achieve some of our goals before we actually adopt them, this will take some investment in building this capacity. And also, we're not going to be able to have perfect information about everything. As we implement policies, we also want to research and understand how they're working, right? And what opportunities there may be to make them more efficient, or if maybe they're not efficient at all, we want to understand what works well so we can do that more. And that is a task that needs to start before you actually implement the policies, to design that research, to make sure we have the right data, a baseline to compare against. So getting back to, so this is my last slide. And I'll just end with commenting on Senator Chitten's comment about the equipment that UNH has that we do not have. If I was to put my money somewhere, the state's money somewhere, we're a smaller university. We can't do everything, and expensive pieces of equipment for the occasional projects probably not the best use of limited resources. But here's something that is uniquely Vermont, right? Our policy decisions, the people who live here understanding their needs, how they travel, how they'll be impacted by things, that's something you really can't outsource. And that's something where I see, if we can build capacity there, we can make a real difference in Vermonters' lives, our economy, saving money, being more efficient. So I'll end there. I'll take any questions you have.
Any questions? Senator Chittenden, you want to follow up on some of your concerns, or?
No, I just would love to know, Gregory, that you work with VTrans. If you see other ways that we can get the state to work better with UVM, more closely aligned, so that we're having UVM fit the needs of the VTrans, I welcome any ideas on how to do that, because I think it's an important partnership to foster.
Yeah, as Emily mentioned, we have a pretty good relationship with VTrans. I think that the challenge I see, it's the longer term nature of some of these questions, and in particular things, some of these policy questions come from the state. State legislature adopts policies or considers policies, and the traditional way that the funding that like Emily has control of, I don't know all the details of it, but it's not exactly on the same timeline of these questions come up. As I talked about, this could be a 2 or 3 year project to really understand how some of these policies could work. And the way we do things now, the sources of funding and the program, it's not, that becomes a challenge. A lot of the work we're doing, the policy related work I showed, is funded through our university transportation centers, USDOT, through that partnership with the University of California, Davis. So that's how we're funding that work. That center ends this year. We have to recompete in it in a big national competition that has not been announced yet. And so that's what we've used. But I think it's some things I'd like to pursue are, one is having a way to better connect would be creating some sort of statewide transportation research and policy forum, different than the VTrans program that Emily sponsors is great for disseminating the research and showing the results of our projects. I'm imagining something where we can have the state legislature, the various advocacy groups, the various firms, businesses who are interested in this transportation policy questions and challenges, whether come to campus here or somewhere else around the state that's convenient. And we can share our ideas as researchers, but really understand what the challenges that various people see. We can then perhaps work with VTrans, the state legislature, A&R. This is not just a VTrans type issue when we start talking about climate change and environment, and identify some of these longer term research questions and problems that we want answered, and then find some way to pay for them. So that's an idea. These federal grants, these UTCs, require 1-to-1 non-federal match. That's always an opportunity to leverage those federal funds, and to the extent that we can find state monies to match the federal funds, it's an opportunity to address state policy questions specifically with those monies, leveraging some of the federal investment, make the money go further. There can be some opportunities there. Emily can tell you about some of the challenges of using some of her, we can't use the federal funds to match the federal funds. So that's another challenge, and an opportunity.
Okay, any further questions? Committee members? I don't see any. Oh, yes, go right ahead, Senator Chittenden.
So I don't see anybody else jumping in. I just echo that point, Dr. Rowengold. But when I was the chair of Green Mountain Transit, we in the before times that we had the public transportation summit, and we got VTrans to come down and agencies from all over the state. It was at a hotel for a day, and so there was just a great time to get everybody in the field of public transportation in the same room, networking, understanding what their struggles are, and just sharing resources. It was very valuable. I could see the same type of merit in transportation and getting everybody from across the state, inviting them up to a physical space. Because I think this pandemic's over. What do you guys think? Is it over? We could plan it out for this summer maybe, and just get everybody that knows these things to know who each other are and what we're struggling with. And I see merit in doing something like that.
Yeah, I think it'd be great. We, like I said, it's knowing what the questions are can help us. Of course, we're always looking for funding and ways to pursue this, but we, even knowing when we write our federal grants, knowing what the questions are, which we might not be aware of. I think there's a lot of value there in really staking out a longer term research agenda. And then with that, we can think about how to implement that research. And then ultimately, right, the goal is to help make better decisions, smarter decisions, more cost-effective decisions.
Okay, anything else?
Yeah, I have a quick question, Leslie.
Yes, go right ahead, Senator Pertlick.
Thank you, Chair. I took a note that at one point one of your slides used the word alternative transportation, and I wondered if you had a definition for that.
Yeah, so it's kind of it's a weird term, as you know, we used to call anything besides driving a car an alternative form of transportation. So by that, it's biking, walking, transit. You could even get into all the other new forms of travel we have, whether it's e-bikes, e-scooters, drones. So we use the term alternative to refer to anything besides driving a car. Driving a car still accounts for, you know, over 90% of how people travel in Vermont. So everything else is alternative. And the
So like
challenge,
electric vehicles, you don't consider electric vehicles alternative? Electric vehicle driving is not an alternative transportation mode.
it's really not an alternative form of transportation. It's an alternative type of fuel or energy source, right? And you know, we have a huge focus on electrification because, quite frankly, it's really difficult to work out transit and biking and walking when we're a really rural throughout state. And so there's a lot of opportunity there. There's also a lot of challenges because those longer trips raise questions with range anxiety, right? People are worried about the range they get. It still takes longer to charge the vehicles. There used to be there's still, early on, there was limited supply of vehicles. There weren't four-wheel drives. There weren't big trucks. But now you can buy a Ford F-150 if you can get your hands on one electric.
You can put a deposit down. You can't really buy one. My other question was on that slide that you showed of the data of driving miles. I assume that's just based on the address where it's registered, and then you do those odometer readings from the inspections.
Yeah, lots of vehicles are registered at PO boxes and other things.
Right.
Yeah. So we're using that data because it's data we already collect, called administrative data. It's the state owns it, so we don't have to pay some tech company that's spying on your cell phone to get the data about where you travel. And it also, we've taken that data, can take the information from the vehicle registration record and look up the estimated fuel economy of the vehicle from an EPA database. And we can combine that with estimate of how far you drive based on the odometer reading, and we can estimate the fuel use, greenhouse gas emission reductions. And we can use this information to track how the different policies that might be implemented as part of the comprehensive energy plan or climate action plan, if they're actually working. And we can see where it's working, where it's not. We can see if, are these policies just affecting people in Burlington? Is it working for people out of the Northeast Kingdom?
Right.
So it's a really,
And maybe this is a question for Emily. When we get the vehicle miles traveled number, and maybe it's not for Emily, it's AOT maybe, because AOT publishes the vehicle miles traveled number, right? So how are they crafting that number? And are they working with like the transportation center to come up with that? Or are they just doing it, they're crunching their own numbers?
So yeah, I'm not the authority on this, but I think it is our travel model that the Transportation Center is currently helping us with. So
it doesn't actually come from the travel demand model. It comes from, it's called the HPMS, the Highway Performance Management System. All those little pneumatic tubes you see around the highways every once in a while, the black strips you drive over, they count the number of vehicles. Those are systematically moved around the state across all different types of roads. They go into a statistical model to interpolate how much driving there is. That every state has to report that to USDOT, and they publish the statistics. We run a statewide travel demand model, which also is another way to estimate VMT. It's actually calibrated using that data, but it allows us to make forecasts about if different people live in different places, how much more or less travel there would be. So it's a forecasting tool. So the HPMS data, it's not the best. It's an estimate. Everything's an estimate. The odometer readings, they're messy. Some people inspect their car like 10 times in 1 week as they try to get it fixed and things. And we've got people don't live where they register their vehicles, of course. And but it's another way to look at things.
You don't know how much they're driving out of state. So you use that data to collaborate or calibrate the other data. So you have that data from those things that people drive over, but you also have the odometer readings. You also have the amount of gas that was sold.
Yeah,
those things.
Yeah, you can do, when we look at greenhouse gas emission inventories from driving, we do it both top down and bottom up. So we can look at fuel sales and estimate the emissions based on that. We can also start from how much people drove, were they driving, and estimate the fuel consumption emissions that way. Those numbers never add up, but they get in the same ballpark.
Can you study how mad people would be if Senator Chittenden gets his way by putting cameras everywhere to monitor?
We are actually we are in the midst of a study to get at that question. I guess we didn't frame it as how mad people would be, but we are looking at what we might call perceptions of different ways of paying for the roads.
Okay.
And specifically, we're trying to understand the motivation, sort of what's behind some of those perceptions, and how they can be perhaps modified through providing different types of information about the policies and the different options for how those things can be done that preserve more privacy at the expense of less accurate accounting for where
We're gonna do it in South Burlington only, so.
Well, there's all sorts of cool ways to do this. You can use these RFID tags that are just like if you tap a credit card to pay, something like that. You can have one in your car that just has information about your car, like its average fuel economy. So when you go to the pump, it can, you're still basically like paying the gas tax, but it's adjusted based on your fuel economy. So you're actually paying more of a mile-based fee rather than just, if you drive a car that consumes a lot of gas, you pay a lot more for the roads than someone who drives a car that's really fuel efficient. But these fees go into a highway trust fund that's largely just to pay for maintenance and construction. So you can adjust, you can make it more like a mile-based fee without having to track where the vehicle's going or anything like that.
Too much information. Phew, wow. It's going to be so automated these days. Guy came in the store the other day and he had his watch and he hits the credit card machine and the watch relays his credit card. It's just amazing. I can't. You're going to be able to do everything with a watch.
Buck Rogers.
I know. It's just, I can't figure this all out. Okay. Any other questions or comments this morning?
One last thing on that, since Senator Persick mentioned my name, I just see a huge growth area for making our roads smarter in the years to come. Our cars are getting really intelligent, but I think every red, yellow, green stoplight should be intelligent enough to track which cars are going through those intersections, and that can be used for usage-based fees if we want to go that route, but also for traffic decongestion and safety protocols. So,
well, I'll give you, Mr. Chittenden, I'll give you an example. Again, last week, I got a notice from the Massachusetts Turnpike that one of my Corvettes went through their booth without paying again. Last year, I got 3 of them. The cars never leave the garage in the wintertime and never been in Massachusetts. And I got another bill. So they got the license plate number 806, but they don't know. I mean, I have to call them and tell them, no, I wasn't there. I mean, it's technology sometimes goes too far.
Is one of your grandkids sneaking out when you're not looking?
Yeah, right. It would be hard without batteries in them. Okay, anything else this morning? Thank everybody for coming. Good information, and we appreciate it. And unless there's any further questions, I guess we're done this morning. Okay, Jeannie, you want to take us offline, please?